All right, guys. So in this video, I want to have a little interview with a really good friend of mine who was actually one of the inspirations for my blue collar strategy originally. His name is Matt. He's from Australia, and he is a really interesting example of what could be done if you leverage the blue collar life to free yourself. And in a previous video, I spoke about how the blue collar life could give you a whole bunch of different lifestyles. Like you could be somewhere living in the Midwest, and you could be 20 years old, and you could be thinking, "Damn, I just want to have a wife, kids, family, whatever." And the blue collar life can give you that. You can have your family. You can probably provide for them. Eventually, you can grow your business. You can have employees, and maybe you sell your business. Maybe you hold on to your business. That's one path. But there's other paths. You could be an independent contractor. You could be someone that basically has full control over his workload, who he works with, when he works with them, what city he works with. And I want to just emphasize the one of the biggest aspects of this lifestyle is the freedom and independence. And one of the big reasons I chose the blue collar route for a couple of years was because I saw what was happening in the corporate world, especially in the US. And one of the biggest things that really traumatized me and made me think, hell no, was seeing the cancel culture. Like people working all these white collar jobs, and basically you'll go on their social media one day, or like the HR lady does, or some other person reports it, and then they get fired for having some like weird views or something. And I just thought to myself, what kind of bullshit is that? Like, this channel obviously talks about masculinity, and to me, that's just the opposite of masculinity. Is when somebody owns your balls, and they could say, "Oh, we don't like what you said about so and so political thing or whatever," and it's like, "Sorry, we're gonna have to let you go because our staff feels uncomfortable or whatever." Like that was a huge reason. It wasn't the only reason. It was also because I saw the trend with programming and AI, and I thought, it's going to be pretty unstable industry. But anyway, so Matt and I are going to talk today about his experiences and just have a conversation about how he's managed to leverage that lifestyle, and then his lifestyle in general too, about like travel and kind of his unique take on maybe his philosophy on travel and life, and uh, maintaining kind of a light footprint on the world in some ways. The pros and cons of it, because it's not just fucking uh, sunshine and rainbows. It's tough. It can be tough at times, but then there are some really interesting rewards from it. So yeah, Matt, if you want to give like a little kind of intro on your, how you got into the blue collar world and kind of the early experience of it.
Sure. Yeah, thanks for the intro there, Max. Yeah, I mean, I guess I kind of grew up in an area that didn't offer a lot of opportunities, so I spent a little bit of time, doing dead end jobs, and then I joined the Australian Navy, which was a really good way out of my situation and the area where I grew up. And by the time I left to go join the Navy, I didn't really have much of a stable kind of life anyway. So it really did feel like a departure. And then they posted me around to a bunch of places, and I got comfortable with the idea of just kind of being uncomfortable and not staying in a place for a very long time. And they posted me to 4 different cities across like 6.5 years, and I spent like a lot of time at sea, living in really uncomfortable situations. So I mean, yeah, I did definitely get sick of that though, and I really felt like the job I was doing wasn't going to work out long term, and I had no idea what I was going to do. But I left the Navy and I went to go live in Canada, and I was doing this really shitty job there for a bit, and just about basically pay the bills, because Canada's probably like at least 20% harder than Australia in terms of making money, and it's still North America, and a lot of people I think from Australia get a bit of a shock when they go to Canada and they realize that the money that you earn just doing a regular job is barely enough to be able to sustain yourself there. And so, I mean, even with working full time, I was going backwards. And I mean, I kind of got lucky. I was living in a share house and in a half decent part of Vancouver, and this guy came to move in there, and it was through the winter. So the Vancouver winters are pretty bad, and he was basically going out and door knocking for a couple of hours, selling. I think at the time, because it was winter time, he was selling gutter cleaning, and he would go out and work for just a few hours, 2 or 3 hours, and he would earn probably almost double what I would from working for 8 hours. So I would have to get up early. Sometimes I think at one point, I didn't have a car, so I would have to take a bus and a train out to this place, and it was freezing cold, and I was working in this environment that was terrible. And then I'd come back home, and I was making like no money. And so eventually, long story short, I ended up working with this guy. And come springtime in Vancouver, we started like aerating lawns. And I mean, the first day we went out, we were basically like hustling, knocking doors, and we made $400 each in probably about 4 or 5 hours, which at the time felt like a new chapter of my life, because I was like, okay, well, I've just made $400 in this short amount of time. It wasn't even like a full day, and I had to work pretty hard. I had to push this machine around, do a lot of different jobs, and I was physically exhausted by the end. But then once you kind of jump ship from doing like a regular kind of shitty job, like I was doing, to seeing how fast you can make cash, I mean, that's just what I did. So I did all these like kind of seasons in Vancouver, and also Calgary and Edmonton in Canada, where I would knock doors, sell all these lawn care services. And it was an overall very rewarding and enjoyable experience, but it was also very difficult, because if I didn't feel like going out that day, or if I didn't go out that day, I ended up getting nothing. But you sort of start to see that getting paid directly from the customer, you understand what you're worth, because every time you're just a regular employee, you're never really able to actually see what your value really is. It's like, apart from the time that you're about to leave, and maybe they want to give you like a pay rise to be able to keep you. And it is really nice to have a normal job and just be able to turn up and work. And obviously there's going to be a lot of people who probably see this, and maybe your job pays really well, but for a lot of people whose working life isn't great, or you're not happy with your job, even if the money is good, I think self-employment is a harder path. But I think what we're all probably looking for now is a bit of a shortcut to sort of being into a better position, or getting ourselves into a better position than just kind of living paycheck to paycheck, because these corporations and these big companies all around the world, whether it's in Australia or whatever, they love to see people just kind of on that grind of just never really kind of getting super far ahead, and so that they're just incentivized to keep turning up to work. And you do that for 20, 30, 40 years, and you might look back on your life and go, well, I wish I kind of did something a little bit harder. And so, Max, I encourage you to go down the route of becoming an electrician or a plumber. And I even spent a couple of days working with you last year in Florida, and, respect, it's like hard work what you were doing. And being a plumber is not easy, but I also saw you earning, especially in the United States, really good money, right? Over 100 or 150 USD an hour. And so, you compare that to even doing something that's still pretty hard. Like I'd say psychologically, it's pretty goddamn hard to go and turn up to a job that you hate. It might not be physically hard. You might not have to unblock a toilet, but if you're at the point where you're like, fuck, this sucks, like I really don't want to have to go to work, and it's like, Monday morning, I'd argue that that's quite a lot harder than turning up to a job where you're getting paid well. And, it might be like a difficult job that you have to do, digging a ditch or something, but, apples for apples, it's like, I mean, there's no comparison. So yeah, anyway, it's kind of a long answer to your question there, but I guess, I'm grateful to have met that guy. he sort of gave me like a way out and showed me kind of what's possible. And so I would refer back to the door knocking, um, for anyone that's kind of looking for a way to like start out to become self-employed. When you look at somebody's house and you look at the burden of what it is to be a homeowner, it's pretty goddamn annoying. I mean, it's nice to have your own house, and it's really a nice thing to not have to rent and everything like that. But a house needs a hell of a lot of maintenance, and it's not just mowing the lawn or doing the garden. Like if you knock on somebody's door, you might see, an overgrown tree. The windows might be dirty. The gutters might need cleaning. If you're living in an area where the house has moss on the roof, the moss might need cleaning off. Their driveway might need pressure cleaning. There could be something broken, like on their gate or their fence or like whatever. Like I have a friend who like was door knocking in Sydney a couple of years ago, and he's kind of handy. He's not qualified necessarily in any particular trade, but he knows how to fix things. And he made in Sydney like I think 15 grand in about 3 or 4 days, because he went to this one guy's house and he's like, I'll fix this, I'll paint that, I'll do this, I'll do that. And it's none of it's like super difficult, but he eliminated all this guy's problems. This guy has probably been trying to figure out how to solve for a long time. And he's created this instant relationship of, business owner and customer, and there's no intermediary taking any money from that. That's just you to him. And so it's a beautiful thing. I mean, yeah, so it helps to live in an area where you have money, basically, or where there is money. So, it doesn't really sort of do super well to be trying to do this in an area where people are kind of renting and they don't give a shit. But having said that, I have found that poorer areas, people can be a lot looser with their money. So it's not to say that you shouldn't go and door knock and try to make money. It's just that their budget will be a lot less. So if you're able to like do certain services that are sort of within the $100 or $200 range, there's a good chance that people in poorer areas will go for it. But if you go to richer areas, it's not always like super wealthy areas. People there are very, very savvy. Rich people are extremely, stingy actually sometimes, because they know exactly what things are worth. They're very smart. So the ideal area to kind of work whatever kind of trade or whatever kind of work you want to do is like an area where it's like upper middle class, where people have expendable income and aren't so uptight. So that's what I would advise for anyone who's thinking about becoming self-employed.
But just to be clear,
try to be.
Yeah. So just to kind of clarify the narrative of the story too as well, and obviously it was good information. You touched on a lot of points, and we can kind of narrow down. But just so we kind of have a clear story arc. So you were in Canada, you met this guy. He kind of showed you around. It was kind of a lucky occurrence. He kind of showed you some strategies on like door knocking, aerating lawns. And then eventually you go to Australia, and basically
Yes.
you went straight into your own thing, or did you continue working for someone at first, or no? You just went straight into it.
Yeah, I even shipped like 2 of my machines back to Australia, and I didn't really have enough money to actually buy a proper business. Like in Australia, if you want to start like a landscaping, or in Australia we just call it like a lawn care business, you're supposed to probably have like 40, 50,000 Australian dollars, and I didn't have that. So I had enough money to buy some more equipment and a trailer, but I basically, I started using the door knocking to go out and build up customers, and it took me a little over a year to really get going. And initially I started off in kind of a bad area, and it was kind of hindering my progress. And so as soon as I moved up to like the main part of Perth, where I'm still based now, I was in areas where there was a lot more customers with more expendable money. And so my strategy from that point was to basically work full time for 4 years, which I guess I did. And it was kind of a tough 4 years, because I had to do these winters in Perth, and winters in gardening and lawn care is very quiet.
Why did you? Why was 4 years part of your strategy?
that was just basically the point where I just got sick of it. So
But
I didn't
like,
want to do any more. I didn't see the point in doing any more. I probably could have kept building the business up. And I know that, my income, if for whatever reason, if I'd stayed on, I would have been on probably like a hell of a lot more money than what I'm making even now. But I mean, I just reached a point where, yeah, this seems like a good time because my dream, basically, the reason what I was doing all this was to travel, right? I wanted to
right.
see the world and I wanted to experience that freedom. And so I left during COVID, and that was when basically in Australia it was very strict and very hard to actually leave the country. And most Aussies weren't even aware that there was a clause that if you want to leave Australia, you can. It's just that you have to sign a waiver saying that you're going to go for more than 3 months. You can't just decide you're going to come back or want to come back in 2 weeks. So because I signed that, I was authorized to leave the country. And this is at a time where there was like almost no flights coming in and out. And then, I flew to Turkey and ended up, being overseas for like nearly 2 years. And so I was happy I made that choice. I mean, I was basically speaking to people who were, back in Australia, back in Melbourne and stuff where I grew up, who would, under these severe lockdowns from COVID. And I was like riding a motorbike through Turkey, meeting all these incredible people, going to all these countries. And I had to do like a lot of PCR tests to get across these borders, but it wasn't that much of a hindrance. I mean, I thrived during COVID. I loved it because there was no tourists in all these places that I was going.
Yeah,
And
it's funny how that works. But let's touch on the idea of like, because this is a big topic as well. Because a lot of people think if you start a blue collar business, you have to build all this trust and you have to market yourself and you have to get all this word of mouth and you have to basically stabilize yourself and your reputation in a community, which is true. There is a truth to that. Obviously, a plumbing company that's been in the same area for 20 years and everybody knows them is going to have a lot more maybe like incoming calls every day than someone who's like a solo contractor. But so, how was that experience for you in terms of like the sacrifice and the realities of like being in and out? Like, what does that do to your clients, and how do you manage it so that it's not dire, so that you can come back and still know that you're gonna have cash flow?
most of my clients are not repeat clients now. I do have a few, but the services that I'm doing now are really just seasonal. And for the most part, I do new jobs every year now. Like at new properties that I've not worked on before. There's always like a few like repeat customers who want me to come back every year. But in terms of, I guess, when I first started out, building up the business and stuff, I guess the most important thing was to just kind of treat people well, be honest, not don't rip people off, like try to do a good job where you can. People notice everything, and a lot of the time they won't communicate their dissatisfaction. They might just come a point where they'll just let you go if like there's something that's kind of annoying them, or something that's not they're not happy with about the job. So if you go in with the mentality that people are 100% aware of not just kind of the job that you've done, but also like your attitude towards the job and everything, right? If you have interactions with them, and so you've got to sort of go in with a bit of a long-term mentality, dealing with people. And so when I was full-time in Perth, that's what I tried to do. And it's not always easy because it's just hard. Being self-employed, you've got to do everything. And so I kind of hope that answers your question.
No, I meant more like in the sense, how do you feel with the reality of of coming and going in terms of a disadvantage, because you're going to have competitors that were there the whole year, right? So you end up kind of having to redo a marketing plan or redo some kind of reach out strategy. And obviously now it's worth mentioning that there are apps that was a big strategy I used. I used Thumbtack, which was a construction or home services app. There's several different ones, but these apps actually give you a bit of a cheat code because for those of you that want to have at least some experience like this, where you travel and you maintain your blue collar business, one of the benefits of the apps is that even if you leave for 6 months, in theory, you get back, and on that same day you get back, you could reactivate the apps, and it'll send out leads. It'll send you leads of whoever is on the apps, and if you have good reviews, it'll just keep sending you leads. So they don't care that you've been gone for 6 months to Thailand. They don't care that you've been in South America or whatever you've been doing, because you could just reactivate the apps and just immediately start getting business back. So that's a big advantage of the 21st century right now. That maybe in the 80s it wouldn't have been that easy. If you left in the 80s and you had a plumbing business and then you came back, then you'd have to literally go door to door, which could be a strategy, and I've done that too, but that would be your only strategy. Like you'd have to literally go around telling everyone that you're back in town, and like on top of that, you wouldn't have had a cell phone. So there are certain ways that you can kind of leverage the blue collar life with technology. And that was my question for you. It's like, how do you feel in terms of has it really impacted you that you have to kind of market yourself, or is it such an efficient process to you now that you know exactly where to go and how to do it that the money starts rolling in pretty quick?
Yeah, for me, I guess I've gotten pretty lucky. In Perth, in Australia, it's very sandy and people's lawns always struggle. And so the main services that I do now are verdi mowing and lawn aeration. And verdi mowing is quite unique to the west part of Australia. In fact, I don't think many parts of the whole world really do it. It's just basically where a lawn becomes so spongy and so thick that it's catching all the water that's basically going on. And it's also just making the lawn hard to mow. And I think it's just because of the sandy soils in Perth that are kind of getting sucked up when people mow their lawn with a rotary mower, or maybe it's just a natural part of the lawns, lawns growing in kind of sandy soils, but they need to be verdi mowed probably every 3 or 4 years, and the money's really good. And there's not many people that do it in Perth because the work is very hard. Like sometimes, if you're not sort of mindful, a lot of this stuff ends up in these catchers on my machine, and I have to take the catcher and put it in my trailer, and sometimes it weighs as much as 100 pounds, 50 kilos, and it's fucking heavy. So, you've got to be kind of fit and have good health to do it. And a lot of the contractors in Australia or in Perth are older guys, and they just can't manage it, man. Like once you're in your 50s doing this kind of work, it's pretty hard. I think it's possible, but it's hard work. So there's not a lot of competition, and my business is pretty well established. I've had a consistent website and Google rankings for 9 years now. So I come up pretty high on the Google searches. So it's very helpful actually that I don't have a lot of competition, but who knows in the future? I mean, maybe more people will start doing it, but the sooner you start doing something and getting yourself established, the sooner you can build up that trust than someone who's like a newer business, right? So I have a lot of work coming through my website in answer to your question. I don't really need to worry about remarketing myself, but those apps are handy. We don't have too many of them in Australia. We have one called High Pages, and it sucks. They charge you some ridiculous fee for a lead, and then you go to call the customer, and the job's already been given to somebody else, but you've still got to pay for the lead. And it's like, why am I paying when I'm not even offered a shot at even quoting the job, But so there is that. But it helps. It just get a website, get a Google page, try to get at least 5 positive reviews from your customers, offer them a discount if they're willing to give you a 5-star review. And as soon as you're on Google Maps, the work will start pouring in. So,
but do you miss out on those calls, or do you deactivate your Google when you're gone?
No, I don't deactivate my Google. I have a lot of email inquiries through my website. I've currently got my SIM card with my friend in Australia, so that's with a spare phone, and every couple of days he'll check that. because people text and try to call and stuff. So he's like sort of managing some of my communications from customers. Like really, I probably should be in Australia now answering calls, but come September when the lawns start to wake up, I know my phone's going to go bananas and I'm going to get a million calls when people start looking at trying to get stuff done. So I mean, a lot of people do try and contact during winter, but yeah, I mean, but I haven't yet found a way of being able to answer customers' phone calls like when I'm overseas. It is really tricky. I can have my Australian SIM card in my phone, but answering calls and all that stuff when you're in different time zones, and sometimes the text messages don't get received or get sent through when you're on global roaming. It's just it is kind of tricky. So I probably should turn my WhatsApp into like a business, like a business account number, and basically just link WhatsApp to my website. But I have so much work coming through that it doesn't really, doesn't really bother me, I guess.
And obviously on this channel, so just to reiterate real quickly, this channel is about navigating Dionysus, aka being able to navigate a complex world in 2026 and on, where entire industries are being destabilized. A lot of people are talking about late stage capitalism, late stage, a lot of stuff. Societies are kind of destabilized in a lot of ways. People's sense of meaning, people's sense of community is quite destabilized for a lot of people. Technology is kind of moving alarmingly fast. So like every year, entire industries can get displaced by technology right now. So again, the blue collar window, I don't know how long it's going to last, but every generation gets a window. Like some generations got, I don't know, maybe they got the one of the famous examples is the 1950s in the US was kind of like the baby boomer, like you could work at some crappy job and still have enough to buy a house, a car, feed a family, have a stay-at-home wife, etc. Now that's not really much the case. So every generation kind of gets their window, and this is a particularly interesting window for the next 10, 20, 30 years. So maybe longer, but the guys that are listening right now, I mean, Matt had some luck as well. Like he kind of found an interesting niche, and that's a good sort of goal. Like try to get lucky and find your own niche as well. And we also spoke about like finding the right neighborhood and like not positioning yourself in the hood, for example, because people are not going to have a lot of money. I had that experience before in Miami when I was living there and working. When you go to these bad neighborhoods, like I would get a notification on the app and it would be like to the bad neighborhood. And it's true, like what you were saying, that they could be more loose with their cash. But I've also had situations where people tried to blame me for something that went wrong that I had nothing to really do with. And it almost got kind of dangerous. Like I remember one particular scenario where I was repairing someone's shower, and I told the guy to go outside and like turn his water valve off so that I can start repairing the shower without being like sprayed or whatever. So he goes outside, shuts it off, but because his was like crappy and plastic or something, it fucking broke, and like the water was just like just spewing outside, and it was like late at night, and he had like 5 kids in the house, and I was like, fuck. So I had to go to the city sidewalk and like shut the freaking meter off over there. And then the guy was claiming that it was my fault that his fucking water valve was so shitty that it broke. He's like, you broke it. I'm like, your valve is obviously shitty, and like you're the one that literally shut it off. Like I didn't even touch it. So he's trying to basically blame me and get a free repair, when in reality, if he was a bit more polite, he could have just been honest about, I don't know, maybe his financial situation, and I would have offered to do it as long as he maybe paid for the material at least or something. But
yeah, no, you don't want to be working for broke people, man.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So like
this, no, but it's like yeah, especially when you're basically working on credit and you might give them an invoice and like, a week or 2 weeks passes and they haven't paid it. Last thing you want to be doing is giving all these people credit. I mean, if you've got like a same day payment thing where like, you finish the job and you expect payment straight away, that's fine. But like, sometimes it's expected with the trades that you have an invoice that, you email through and it gets paid within 3 days. And it's, luckily in Perth, again, I haven't had to worry about that situation too many times, but there has been times where I've chased people up who are probably under like mortgage stress or, something going on and it might take like a couple of months to get your payment and they're probably just hoping you're going to give up. But even if it's like $100, man, I'm not just going to let you like not pay that money.
Yeah.
I did the job. So, but like, I would basically say to anybody, if you're kind of free with where you can work, like, for us, yes, we have this window that we need, and for our generations, things are quite dire. But okay, you talk to the boomers, and they're going to say something completely different. They've got their house, or maybe they're both their investment properties paid off. They've basically lived through this massive increase in wealth post World War II up to now, and they've experienced these housing booms sort of increase their equity by hundreds of thousands or millions. And so if you go to areas where there's a lot of boomers, it's going to be a completely different experience than working around people your own age. I mean, imagine yourself, you put yourself in the situation where you've got a partner, you've got kids, somebody who's like, the same age as you. Like, how would you feel about paying $500 for a plumber to come out? You're not going to be very happy about it, especially if that money, you need it for something else, compared to somebody who's, has quite a lot of money. And while you're there, they might say, oh, actually, while you're here, I might need this fixed and that fixed. And, it's just, you need to work in areas where there's money. It really, really helps. So even if you're part of like a bigger city, try to, even if it's not where you're living, set the location of your business close to like one of these areas. It really does make a big difference, even if it increases your driving time and everything. Yeah, they're just so much nicer to deal with, like the older generation that have money there.
Yeah,
They're not going to sort of argue too much about prices and everything like that, and they can handle high quotes.
That was one of the things that was wearing me down at the end of my last stint, because I did a 9-month stint in the U.S. just now, and in Miami, and it was tough. Like,
I can imagine.
No, but
I can imagine.
what was tough was also the dealing with customers that just didn't want to pay, or like every day you're getting people that complain. So you're doing 2 or 3 jobs a day, and every fucking day you get the same argument. What, this would cost 300? Oh man, come on. So that was starting to wear me down, because I was like, I'm tired of fucking arguing. Like, I just want to go in, do the job, and leave. But part of the reason that I was arguing so much was because the location I chose was, in theory, Miami is rich, but there are a ton of neighborhoods that are just barely, like, people have decent jobs, but they're kind of just barely making it. And it was wearing me down, and I was also kind of feeling bad. Like, I was feeling bad for these people. I was like, oh my God. There was times when I felt like I'm the bad guy. And I know that's not true, obviously. But, like, it made me really doubt myself at times, because I was like, damn, these people are struggling. Like, and, sometimes I did lower the price many times. If they were good at, like, if they were convincing with their arguments, there was, but it did get tiresome. And like, I recently realized, especially after talking to Matt, that was probably not a great idea in terms of, especially as a place where you just want to quickly go and make money. Like, you're not really established. People are going to argue till the death for paying you less. It's a different strategy. So this is another important aspect, actually. If you have really good branding, people argue less. Like, if you show up and you're in a uniform and you have like an iPad and you're going through like the list of prices, and then you have like a van with like really good branding, and you're professional, which I wasn't. I was kind of more of a ragtag guy, unmarked van, fucking.
I would argue though that if you were the uniform guy with the iPad, they wouldn't call you at all, because they'd be too scared of your quote. That's the reason why they're calling you, is because they're hoping that you're going to be cheaper.
That's true. That's definitely true. There is an element of truth to that. But I've noticed like they also tend to lowball you a lot when you're that guy. And like there are times when, because I used to work for a big company that had the van, that had the branding, that had the uniform. I wore their uniform. I saw how it was, and we would show up, and the guy would have his little iPad, and he'd be like, "That'll be $1,000," and they'll be like, "All right," because you're just there, and they're just like, "Fuck, I guess that's how much it costs." But when I show up with my fucking undershirt smelling like alcohol, no, I'm kidding. I wasn't that bad. All right, guys, come on. But like, they just go, "Yeah, this guy will do it for $100," and I'm like, "Fuck you! I'm not digging a 60-foot trench for $100. Like, get the fuck out of here," you know. So that's when I realized like Miami was not probably not the best place. There was other reasons for that as well, which we might get into, but we had a good conversation about this earlier about how, again, yeah, you want to choose neighborhoods that are kind of rich and where there is a good concentration of wealth. Yeah, and then and also if you can afford the branding, try it. There again, there is an advantage to not to being the unmarked guy, but damn, there could be an advantage to being the branding guy, especially if you want to like eventually eventually hire people or sell the business. And that's another thing I want to get into now actually is because again, this isn't just a business video about like markets and prices and stuff like that. It's about being a man and like living a certain lifestyle and being free. And like you're a single guy, right, Matt?
Yeah.
Yeah, and you're self-employed, so you have a particular angle on this situation. And can you kind of explain a little bit like the highs and lows of like in terms of just how you've kind of your philosophy a little bit on relationships and business and how that ties in, like what the link is for you, if that makes sense.
Um. Yeah. Well. Yeah. I was reading a post yesterday. It was quite interesting, and the guy basically said, "Okay, you wake up. I think he even said at like 42, 43. I'm 42. It's 2 a.m. and you have anxiety because you have a wife, you have 3 kids, and you have limited freedom. And at that moment, you start thinking about everything you've sacrificed for your family and everything. And he said, and he flips it and he says, okay, like you're single, you wake up in an apartment by yourself, you're 43, and you think about in some ways how empty your life is because of the fact that you don't have the kids, you don't have the wife, and it's like you've also made this kind of sacrifice to be single. And he basically said, well, either way is going to create a sacrifice, so you just got to choose your sacrifice. Either way has a downside, but for me, I guess freedom is just a really beautiful thing because of how rare it is. I mean, people have been traveling for a long time. I read these stories, even going back 80 years ago of people, traveling the world by motorbike and traveling by bicycle and doing all these things. But it was very, 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 very rare for people to travel the world. And in some ways, they probably would have found it easier because there probably wasn't so many difficulties with crossing borders and stuff. Or maybe there was, I don't know. I'm guessing people would have still needed visas, but depending on what you want to do and if you want to see the world like I do, and I get really excited about going to like new countries and seeing new places and meeting new people and just the unpredictability of life. I just see my business basically as a way to generate, the energy, the money that I need to be able to go to use in other parts of the world and to have these experiences. And it's sort of not a great strategy in some ways in the long term, but it's not too bad because of the fact that for me, I make enough money to basically, have these work seasons, go and travel for over half a year, but I still come back with money saved. Mm-hmm. So I'm not burning through like my entire amount of money, and I'm getting to do things that, I think are pretty cool. And for me, I like to ride motorbikes around the world. I like to hike. I like to, do some adventurous stuff. And right now I've been living in Chiang Mai now for 2 months, and in Thailand, which is a beautiful city for anyone who hasn't been. It's a great place to meet some really cool like expats, and most of the people that I meet that are Westerners, here are living here permanently, it is one of those places that it's like very attractive to set your life up.
I want to
But
quickly interrupt
yeah,
you real quick just to talk about the idea of the window of opportunity. You kind of mentioned it, because that's one of the, I would say, the one of the downsides slightly of like being especially self-employed and having experienced it myself. The idea of the window is important, as in you kind of want to play it. You can't make this kind of lifestyle last forever. Some people can definitely milk it for a long time. Don't get me wrong, but especially if you're going to do the self-employed route and you're going to, Matt is an interesting example because you're someone that did it for a long time and kind of like took it to the next step. Some guys just do it for like 2 years, but then they get a girlfriend, then they get married, then they hire employees. But you manage to kind of maintain it, and you have these methods to do that. And I'm just trying to say that this could be an option for some guys that are highly independent, highly almost like Ronin kind of like dudes that are just masterless samurais roaming the world. Some guys have that lifestyle and they can make it last a very long time, and they're very like independent, which I'd like to also talk about next. By the way, the independence and loneliness of it, but the other thing that's worth mentioning is that if you're going to go the self-employed route, you have to be really good with your cash, saving and investing. Like you have to realize that as a self-employed guy, you only have a certain window. So you have to take that money and start stacking it, start learning about some investment vehicles, whether it's real estate, whether it's stocks, whether it's cryptos, diversification. Maybe it's even a business that's less physically demanding eventually. We've spoken about that as well. But the idea is that if you're gonna choose the self-employed route, if that ends up being your route, you do eventually have to start wondering how you're gonna break out of it as well. And like, it's a little bit like being a boxer. You only get a certain window where it's like in your prime to do that kind of physical stuff, and then eventually you want to transition your money out. And you don't want to be like those boxers who just got worn down by their trade and then didn't save any money and then thought they were going to just be
yeah,
young forever. And it's like, no. So that is one of the hard realities of it. And speaking of hard realities, not just that, and you can touch on that as well, but what are some of the realities of self-employment, um, especially during those heavy work seasons, and some of the lower aspects of it, like just like how have you managed to deal with the loneliness? How has it made you better? But where was it the most challenging for you? Because I think this is an interesting philosophical angle to kind of get into.
yeah. Well, yeah, it's interesting what you were just talking about. But yeah, I guess you know, going back to the window just briefly, I'll just
Yeah.
touch on that. So I mean, I spent those 4 years in Perth, and I've still got the nest egg from that now. So like, I saved up the money from that. I didn't burn through it all. So like, I would recommend for anyone who hasn't got any money saved up or hasn't got quite enough, at least work for like a long enough period full time, until you can get some kind of investment or like, strategy going with having like a half decent nest egg. That it might not be enough to like have an early retirement, but it's a long gap between you and the street. Even if you stopped working for a long time, so it's worth like hustling and grinding for a few years. But as far as like the loneliness and everything, and downsides, I guess one of the biggest downsides is like, a customer is never going to pat you on the back and say good job. So if the customer's not going to do it, then nobody's going to probably do it. So you have to be like your own source of kind of, being proud of yourself, being satisfied. And, it doesn't really seem to matter as well, I guess, how hard you have worked in the past. You do build up momentum, but sometimes you wake up and it's just kind of hard to go to work. You just might not feel like it, but you've still got to go anyway. And, it's kind of being disconnected from the flow of society in terms of public holidays and weekends even. Like, I work on the weekends during my season just because why not? I can go out and earn some money. Why not just go out and work? But like, it comes at a massive sacrifice to your social life, oftentimes, just because you become so kind of hyper focused on making money, that you really start to think that there's nothing else more important in life. And maybe for a while there's not, actually, because if you really are trying to escape out of this system that isn't always on your side, let's face it, I mean, capitalism, it really isn't set up for like the common people, especially kind of where we are now. I mean, with the housing prices being high and everything. So, yeah, I guess, I don't know. I guess be your own sort of, you know,
Acknowledge.
like giving yourself, some appreciation and a pat on the back. And because no one's really going to tell you that, like, well, they do tell you like you've done a good job and stuff like that. But when people are paying you like a lot of money, in their mind, that's enough. So
Yeah.
there is like a little bit of resentment sometimes when you're making money and people see how quickly you're making money, because oftentimes your customers don't make money as quickly as you do. And I've noticed that. So even people that I've met who are making good money, like working up in the mines or doing something, their hourly rate's going to be a hell of a lot less than what I'm getting. And so there's that little bit of like handing the cash over, like, oh, okay. So, you get like a bit of a weird vibe from them, but
Yeah, I've had that too.
yeah. But it's just, I don't know. I've got a high tolerance for like loneliness and all that. So for me, I don't sort of mind like too much. But for those who don't deal well with being like kind of alone and having to grind for like long periods of time, yeah, I don't know. You have to question whether you might want to go into business with like a family, like a member or friend, and work together. And it really does help if you do a season, with someone, or like do a business venture with somebody. It does really help because you can kind of, you can pick up the slack when they're not feeling very motivated that day, and vice versa. But yeah, so I don't know, but like. I just think when you're going out and making like 2, 3, 4, even 5 times the amount of money than people who are just working like a regular job, I mean, I don't know. I feel like that's enough because you're basically you're decreasing basically the amount of time needed to get to where you want to get. So you're basically you're earning time is what you're doing, and you're getting more time back to be able to do the things that you really want to do. So
Yeah, I mean, you touched on a very important point. I wasn't really able to grind for that long, but like the 4-year window, if you can pull something off like that and get yourself like a strong nest egg, especially when you're younger, that could be a huge, massive leg up. I think part of the issue for me was that I already put in like a few years apprenticing, and I was already just sick of fucking being in the U.S. But then again, it depends on it depends on everybody's situation, because I have a very unique fucking situation when it comes to like family, when it comes to business, when it comes to the cities I've lived in. I don't really have any family in the U.S., but there are people that have a pretty cool community around them. They have their mom, their dad, their brothers, their sisters.
yeah,
They're kind of high status maybe in their community. Like they know people and people know them and they know where to go. That's kind of a cool spot to be in if you're somewhat satisfied with your situation, or at least you don't hate it. Then take advantage of that. Like use the emotional support and comfort from having that community around you, especially if you go to church or something as well. To use that to kind of soothe yourself during those harder periods and like build your nest egg. And but for me that wasn't really feasible because I was just kind of going down a bit of a self-destructive path in some ways. At least emotionally I was feeling like worn. So I had to get out quicker, but yeah, I mean you can kind of make you can kind of have this lifestyle for however long you need it. I mean that's one of the interesting aspects of it is like you can put it on pause and you can resume it. You can do it for like a 5-year window, and for some lucky guys, a 5-year window is enough to exit the game. Because if you do that 5-year window and you make a couple $100,000, and then you put it into some properties and do this and do that, that could be enough to if you're making passive income through like rentals, that could be enough to sustain travel for like 10 years, 20 years, maybe even longer.
Yeah. And we should briefly touch on that. I mean, for people who don't know, like if you haven't traveled overseas much or like, haven't been overseas at all, the conversion rate for US dollars to, other currencies is incredible. Even Australian, New Zealand, Canada, Euro, like all these currencies. Yeah, I mean, you work for a while and yeah, you can spend a hell of a long time in a lot of parts of the world. And so, yeah, you can do the 5 years and really kind of set yourself up like pretty damn well. I mean, I have a friend, and you've met him, Max Nate, who like, he lives off like 10,000 USD a year, which is kind of threadbare in my opinion. I mean, I don't think, you need to live on such a low amount, but he shows every month basically his budget and how it's done. And he does a lot of cool shit. Like he rides a motorbike all around the world. He's probably been to over 100 countries and, he camps a lot and kind of doesn't stay in like nice hotels, but he gets to see so many cool places and have a lot of really cool experiences and meet a lot of cool people. And, there's some really, really, the thing is with this age as well is that the quality of like hotels in poor countries, like developing countries is increasing. Like, it's not like probably in the 80s and 90s where you would be very lucky to have hot water. Like you can travel through India. I spent a month this year traveling through like a pretty remote part of India, and I was probably spending 20, 30 USD maximum a night on hotels, and it would sometimes include like a really nice dinner and breakfast, and you'd have like a nice space. It would be very clean, and for the most part, my daily expenditure was pretty low. I mean, I had to rent the motorbike, but that was about 15 USD a day, so plus accommodation plus food. So I'm spending 60 USD a day, but I'm like riding through some beautiful, beautiful parts of the world, like in the Himalayas and on the border close to Nepal and China and all that. And so, you look at just what your daily expenditure is just to exist in these countries like America, especially with your healthcare system, and Australia, and like, it's just expensive just to even be there. So yeah, you get your money and then go overseas. Just everything works a lot easier that way. Yeah, I think our countries are becoming too expensive for the average person to really enjoy their life now anyway. So I think to really enjoy your life, you have to go overseas now, because unless you're making 200 grand a year or 150, 200,000 a year, I mean, it's kind of hard to have the same kind of enjoyment in, the Western countries as what you can in going through like, Southeast Asia, Latin America and Eastern Europe and a lot of these like cheaper regions of the world.
Yeah, I mean, look, some guys, they're gonna be in a state these days, especially again with like the decline of the West and everything, and kind of family structures, like community structures being destabilized. A lot of guys are just gonna opt for like a single lifestyle. And I used to go to some groups where it was a lot of guys that were just single and just never gonna settle down. Um, and this particular like blue collar strategy could be very interesting for those type of guys. But it doesn't have to be that way either. Again, you can still leverage the blue collar lifestyle in your city in the U.S. or in Australia, and at least enjoy the independence of thought that it buys you, and the independence of being able to choose your clients, and that type of independence is also independence while raising a family and so on. Um, but uh, but but it's interesting because I'm just saying, like, there's this archetype I have in mind of like this kind of Ronin guy who's like surfing the chaotic decline of the West, and he's just enjoying this life overseas half the year and eventually probably full time. And a lot of guys are gonna listen to this advice, and they're gonna do it, and they'll find love overseas for obvious reasons as well. They're gonna find better quality women overseas a lot of times, more attractive, more grateful, more receptive. More feminine, all that kind of stuff. But I wanted to say,
absolutely.
But I was also going to say, like, it doesn't have to be about overseas. It could also be traveling all 50 states of America. Like one of my friends, Todd, who I'm going to try to interview, he does this as well. He works like 6 months out of the year. He does he does actually like handyman stuff, and he managed to see all 50 states of the U.S. And even in the U.S., it's possible. I mean, he's very good at saving money and budgeting and living cheap and not going to luxury hotels and stuff. But
Yeah.
to to be honest, I even experienced a decent amount of freedom in Miami. Like I was living in an apartment by myself, and sometimes I just didn't work for 4 days. You know, I mean, and I just kind of walked around or biked around and stuff. It's not that great to be like low luxury in Miami though, because then you can't really do much. Like you can't really go to the nice places. You can't really go to the nice clubs that much. You're kind of just stuck riding your bike, you know, and maybe going to Whole Foods and buying some like cold wraps. But like, I'm just saying it can. You could also leverage it, especially in cheaper parts of the U.S. If you just want to have a more relaxed life. Like maybe you want to do your trade, and then maybe you want to have a side business, like you're an artist, or like you like to repair motorbikes, or you like to raise chickens and have a small farm and just have a chill life. It's doable too, especially with the window now, with a lot of the older generations being the ones to to be retiring, but still making up a huge chunk of the workforce. So
Yeah. Well, I think probably the baby boomers are definitely a lot of them would be close to retirement now. I think.
yeah, for
Um,
sure.
but I mean, it's not to say that all of them are super wealthy, but they, as far as like opportunities to create wealth, I mean, I don't think that any other generation has had it so good. Um, it's just, yeah. If you were sort of coming up in the '60s and '70s, as far as I know, I mean, you could just like kind of walk down the street and you could end up getting offered, a bunch of different jobs pretty easily. I mean, there was always the availability of opportunities and probably low competition in terms of starting a business. If you started a business and it was like even semi-original, you probably wouldn't have too many people that were competing with you, and it is quite a bit harder now. But I mean, at the end of the day, you can do something that a lot of other people are doing, but just make sure that you provide like a good service. I mean, even my brother, he's living in Canada, and he's doing like a gutter repair and maintenance and cleaning business, and he does like fascia board repair and stuff like that. And it's a great business because in Canada it rains like 6 months of the year at least.
Mm.
Even in the good seasons it rains, and so people's homes, the outside of their homes, are wearing out. And he's got some like niche services that he does that are make like incredible money. But at the end of the day, he's one of like quite a few businesses in his area, but he's now I think in his fourth year, and he's got about 60 or 70, I think, 5-star Google reviews, and they're legitimate reviews. They're people that have left like long descriptions of the work that he's done, because he's very ethical and he does a very good job. So he's eventually allowed himself to stand out, and now his business is just going to continuously grow. So he's got like if you have like the right attitude, you can definitely stand out, because a lot of people just do like kind of a shitty job and don't really care about a long-term relationship with the client or the area or the reputation too much. So it might take a while, but if you play the long game with your business, eventually you'll start picking up a greater share of the work in your area. But yeah, I think we all have to figure out a way to have some money saved up and not just live paycheck to paycheck. Because I mean, there might come a point where you really just can't work for whatever reason.
Yeah.
And you're in a situation, then you have to go into debt, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, and then you're in a situation where you're not even thinking about your dreams and hopes and aspirations. All you're thinking about is just getting this debt paid off, and then you're basically just a slave. So we've all got to figure out some kind of a strategy, I guess. If you really want to go and do something, I think self-employment is a great route.
Mm-hmm. Cool.
Yeah.
I think we'll leave it at that. Once I end the recording, we'll continue talking a little bit, but yeah,
Sure.
if there's anything else that you wanted to say or anything, but yeah, I think we touched on a lot of points, and I think that's good enough for the viewers here to process quite a bit there. So that was
Cool.
yeah. Is there anything you want to throw in last minute, or you think you said it all?
Nah, I mean, like anyone who's watched this all the way to the end, I just, I would just say thanks. This is my first podcast. I've never done anything like this before. But yeah, it's possible. Just try to get yourself and like a friend or whatever to, if you're both in the same situation, go out and start knocking doors and just seeing if you can sell something at the door, like whatever people need. And once you get your first customer and realize that you don't need like the company or whatever to pay you, it's a great feeling. And then after that, you might just be on your way to, um, a different path. But yeah, other than that, no, not really. I've probably talked well and truly enough, so that's
Mm-hmm.
cool. Yeah.
Cool. All right, guys. Well, hope you enjoyed this one. See you later. Let me just end the recording here.